Howdy guys, welcome back to the channel. This is Ben, and in this video I want to show you how you can get the most out of your Wacom tablet. Whether that's the Wacom Intuos or the Wacom Intuos Pro, small, medium, or large, or even the new Wacom Intuos Pro which I just announced recently, it shouldn't make a difference as all these functions should be the same across all devices. So more than just operating as a mouse that's like using a pen, there are a lot of unique built-in functions on a Wacom tablet that can really help maximize your workflow efficiency. So, with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right in. Okay, so for this video, I'm going to be using a Mac and using Affinity Photo to demonstrate a lot of my examples, mainly because Affinity Photo is the program that I use for all my photo retouching. But everything I show you here should look the same or operate in the same way if you're on Windows or using Photoshop, Lightroom, or any kind of other program. So once you've installed any of the required drivers you need for your operating system, when you go to your system settings here on a Mac, you should have a new section called Wacom Tablet. Or if you're on Windows, in your applications list, select Wacom Tablet, then go to Wacom Tablet Properties. This will bring up the Wacom Tablet menu where you can now customize the Wacom Tablet to do a variety of different things. So what I want to do in this video is just go over each one of these sections because there might be some interesting functions in here that you're unaware of. Alright, so starting here at the top, we have device. This is going to show you which Wacom devices you have hooked up to your computer. Currently, I just have my Intuos Pro Small hooked up, so it's listed right here. Below that, we have Tool. And below that, we have application. So tool is going to show you the functions that are available on your Wacom tablet. Here I have functions, which is the express keys or the buttons on your tablet. Next, you have touch. Now, if you are not using a touch enabled tablet, so if you're using the normal Wacom Intuos or maybe one of the older like Wacom Bamboos or something, you're not going to have this function available. But to be fair, I don't even really use it. I think I mentioned in the video I made a few years back where I compared the Wacom Intuos and the Wacom Intuos Pro. I said that I didn't really use the touch functionality because I just felt it wasn't as precise as a dedicated trackpad. And even though it's supposed to reject your palm a little bit, I would still kind of sometimes get weird movements when I'm using the pen. So I just have touch functionality turned off. But if you wanted to use it, you can see it has a lot of the gestures and things that you can do here. So pretty self-explanatory, definitely worth exploring if you want to use it as a trackpad. And then next you have the Pro Pen 2 because I am using the Pro. I guess I renamed it to Ben's Pro Pen 2. And here is where you're going to be able to customize the functions of the pen. So let's go ahead and go back to Tool, and under Application, by default, you probably will just have one that says All. This basically means that any function you assign to these buttons is going to do the same thing across all of your programs, whether you're in your Finder or Photoshop or Safari or whatever, it's going to do the same thing. But what we want to do is we want to assign specific functions to specific programs, and we do that by adding programs to this list or adding applications. So we can do that by pressing this plus key here. And currently it shows you the applications you currently have open. So I want to do one for Affinity Photo. Now, if you don't have it here, you can go to Browse and you can find that application in your list and bring it up. But here I have Affinity Photo, going to click on that, hit OK. And now we're going to have the Affinity Photo here in our application menu. And so now this means that when I have Affinity Photo open, buttons that I assign here are only going to do functions in Affinity Photo, and they won't affect the functionality in other programs. So let's go ahead and take a look at doing this. So because I am using the Pro, which has 6 express keys, I think if you have the medium or large one, you have more buttons. And I think on the new 2025 Wacom Intuos Pro they just released, I think there's 2 scroll wheels depending on the size you get. I can't remember. But like I said, I imagine that this is all going to work the same way. All right, so on this top button, we have a little pull down menu. And this pull down menu is going to show us all the things that we can do with that button. You can do things like mouse click, assign it keyboard shortcuts, do some tablet specific things, as well as some other kind of on-screen menus that we're going to talk about in a little bit. So first off, clicks, pretty self-explanatory. You can basically have that button operate as a mouse click. Click, right click, middle click, double click, whatever you want to do. I think that this function is here because there are probably going to be some users who are using this Wacom tablet two-handed meaning they're going to have the pen in the right hand drawing, if you're right-handed, of course. And then on your left side, you have your left hand, and you can use your left hand to operate some of these buttons. In my case, I use my keyboard together with my Wacom tablet just because these 6 buttons are not enough buttons to do all the functions and use all the tools that I need to in Affinity Photo. That being said, I do use these buttons, especially for certain keyboard shortcuts that have a lot of keys I have to remember, things like, Shift, Command, Option, E. It's easier for me just to assign that to one button on my tablet. So for me, using a combination of my keyboard and the tablet express keys is what works best for me. So the next section we have under clicks is keyboard, and we have keystroke, modifier, undo, and redo. Undo, redo, pretty self-explanatory. I think what these do is they're just basically doing, on a Mac at least, Command Z and Shift Command Z for undo and redo. Modifier, this is where you can basically set that key to act as a shift or an option or a command or a space or a click. So if you hold it down, it can operate like holding down shift and doing something. But I think the most useful one and the one you're going to be using the most is going to be keyboard keystroke. This is where you can assign a keyboard shortcut and rename it to do certain things that you want. So let's go ahead and test that out really quick. So for example, I'm going to go ahead and open up Affinity Photo here. And let's say that I wanted that top button to create a brand new layer. So the first thing I have to do is figure out what is the keyboard shortcut for new layer. Now for me, because I reassigned everything, layer, new layer, it shows me the keyboard button N is the shortcut for new layer. If I press in on my keyboard, it brings up a new layer. Perfect. So now let's go back to the tablet settings. And under keystroke, I'm going to hit keystroke. I'm going to clear this by pressing the clear button. I'm going to press in, and I'm going to go ahead and rename this to new layer. Hit OK. And now when I go back into Affinity Photo, when I press that top button, it creates a new layer. And you'll also get a little message at the top left hand of the screen that says whatever you have assigned it to. So definitely very useful and a great way to just have some really quick functionality, especially if you are using the pen. It's pretty quick for me just to move my hand over and press that button to create a new layer if I need to. All right, let's go ahead and delete these layers. We don't need that many. Let's go back. Alrighty, so that's a keyboard keystroke, and this is gonna be the most valuable for me. So for example, let's take a look at this middle button. Let's say that I wanted this middle button to merge all visible layers. Now, because I know what these commands are, because I memorized them, I know that it is Shift Option Command E. That is going to be the keyboard shortcut for merging all layers. I can go ahead and say merge all layers. Hit OK. And let's just do a little test here. For example, I'm going to just do a layer here. Let's add a new layer. Let's change to a different color. I did not change color. Different color. Let's do one more layer. A new color. Okay. So you can see here that I have these 3 layers. So now if I press that middle button on my keyboard, it merges all those layers together into one brand new layer. So if I delete these ones below, now I have a merged layer. So that's an example of where the keyboard shortcut is quite intricate because it's got multiple modifiers. So that's an example of if I don't want to memorize all that, it's best to assign it to one easy button. Of course, I have to memorize that that button does that. So let's see what else we can do here. Next, we have tablet. Now, these are things that are going to be specific to a tablet and things that a mouse may not be able to do. And I'm not sure if this function is available on all of its tablets, but I imagine it is. We have precision mode and pressure hold. So precision mode, let's go ahead and say, I'm going to go ahead and just click OK for now. So I'm going to change that middle button to precision mode. What that does is if I press that button, it's going to bring up a little precision window. And what happens is my cursor becomes a lot slower, basically allowing me to do more precise control and have more precise movement over my painting. If I click that button again, it turns off. Now, personally, for me, this is not something that I use too often because if I want really precise control, like I'll just zoom into my image and try to get really precise movements. But if you hit that precision mode, it just kind of slows down the speed of your cursor so you have a lot more precise control over your movements, I could see this definitely being very useful for painters and illustrators where you want to get really fine detail on a particular item or object. But for the kind of work that I do, I don't need to be that precise. So this is something I've never actually used, but it is there if you need to. All right, going back to our settings. The other one was pressure hold. Now let's go back to Affinity Photo here. So currently, let me go ahead and make this brush a little bit bigger. So right now I don't use pressure sensitivity on my brushes. So whether I press down really hard on my tablet or I press down really softly, I get the same width. Most of these tablets all are pressure sensitive. So the harder you press down, it can do different things. Let's go ahead and change. I'm going to double click on this brush. Let's go to dynamics. I'm going to switch the size jitter to 100% and have it be adjusted by pressure. So now if I press down, let's go ahead and clear all this. Let's make a brand new layer. Let's just delete that one. So now if I press very faintly on my tablet, I get a very thin line. But if I start pressing harder and harder, I can get a thicker line, and I can kind of adjust the thickness of my brush by depending on how hard I press. Now, if I don't want that to happen, what I can do is I can do the pressure hold. So what you're gonna have to do is paint and you find a pressure that you like, and then I hold down that pressure hold and it basically locks in that pressure. So even if I paint very lightly or very hard, the pressure does not change. If I release it, then I can go back to kind of adjusting how thick I want that brush. Let's go ahead and delete this. Let's add a new layer. And you paint, maybe you want a really thick one. Maybe you like this width, you hold down that pressure hold, and now that is not going to change depending on how hard you press or not. So again, because of the kind of work that I do, I never use pressure anyways. So this is not something that is useful for me, but depending on your kind of work, it might be actually very useful to you. So that option is there. Let's go ahead and turn this off, add a new layer, and let's check out what else we got here. Okay, navigation. This is going to be pretty self-explanatory. Back, forward, scroll, pan scroll legacy, scroll up, scroll down, pan, zoom, zoom in, zoom out, all kind of things like this. Now, one thing to be aware of, because what I think this is doing, even though it has all these built-in functions, all it's really doing is doing a keyboard shortcut. So for example, let me see, let's try zoom. Now let's go back here. Now let me go ahead and bring up a photo. So here's a headshot I took a while back. So if I press that button and hold it down and I slide my mouse up and down, or not my mouse, my pen, I can zoom in and out. So that is a pretty useful function. Again, because my hand is always on my keyboard, my left hand's always on my keyboard, it's kind of inconvenient for me to move my hand off the keyboard, go over to the tablet, hold down that zoom button and do it here. It'd be easier for me to assign a zoom button on my keyboard, but that option is there if you need it. So one thing to be aware of is that, and I could be wrong, is that all of these built-in like navigation controls, all they're really doing, or all they really are, is just keyboard shortcuts. They're just kind of using the standardized default keyboard shortcuts that most programs use for things for like backward, forward, scroll, zoom, zoom in, zoom out. So if you've actually changed your keyboard shortcuts, say for your zoom button, you may find that when you come here to zoom, it may not work because it's trying to do a keyboard shortcut that doesn't do that anymore because you reassigned it. And I'll show you an example of that in a little bit. So these are some extra buttons you can do to do some basic zoomality, or zoomality. You can do some basic functions that might suit your needs. Let's go ahead and take a look at what else we got here. Application, pretty simple. You can basically have a button to open up an application for you. Again, these are just kind of like quick, easy scripts or keyboard shortcuts, just so it'll do things really fast. If you wanted, you could have that one button open up Lightroom or something that you wanted to do. Okay, next we have on-screen shortcuts. Now these are pretty cool and something I haven't really used too much, but it is there. So talking about how we said earlier, let's go ahead and change this on-screen shortcuts to brush tools. So if I go over here, back to this picture, just go over here, and I hit that middle button, it brings up the brush tools. Now, these are kind of things that are little unique kind of windows, kind of extra windows you can have when you're working. So right now it has brush size up and brush size down. But if I click on brush size up, I get an error sound. And props to anybody who can recognize where that error sound's from. So same with brush size down, because basically I believe that the standardized brush increase, brush decrease for most graphic programs is going to be left bracket and right bracket on your keyboard, but that never really worked for me. So I changed my brush size to somewhere else on my keyboard that's more efficient for me. And so all this is doing is it's trying to hit left bracket, right bracket, which for me does nothing, because if I hit left bracket, right bracket on my keyboard, I get the same error. So that's something to definitely be aware of. If you've already made a bunch of custom commands and you want to do this brush tools and you're like, hey, why doesn't the brush size change anything? That's because it's trying to access a keyboard shortcut that no longer does that anymore. So now that we have this up, let's go ahead and go back here. You can see that all these on-screen shortcuts all kind of do the same thing. They're just laid out a little bit differently. If I go to Photoshop Colorist and click on that, press that button, I get a bunch of Photoshop Colorist tools. But I'm not using Photoshop, so it's not really helpful. But I imagine that all of these things are basically just doing again, keyboard shortcuts. And if you've adjusted them, they may not work. So I think it's actually better to actually just make your own custom ones if you like having some extra on-screen menus. And you can do that by either going to Express menu or Radial menu. So let's go ahead and take a look at the Express menu. We hit Express menu. Let's go over here. And if I bring it up, you're going to notice that it has some Express menu. Now, it's interesting because recently these were all just monochromatic, but for whatever reason, they're now in color. So I don't know what that means. And it has a few basic functions already built in. But what's best, I think, is to customize these to do exactly what you want. Let's go ahead and go back over here. And you can do that by doing the on-screen shortcuts. You click on that. Here I have Express menu already selected. And you can see here is the other ones, right? Brush tools. It has brush size, layer blend. And you can see, like as I said, brush stroke. It's a keyboard shortcut. This shortcut is right bracket, like I mentioned. So you could change that, I guess, to get it to work. But let's go ahead and do the Express key. And let's say that I wanted to have this top piece of the pie be frequency separation, which is something I do quite frequently when I'm doing portrait work or skin retouching. So let's go ahead and we'll start with this one. Let's go ahead and change this to a keyboard shortcut. Now, I already know what my keyboard shortcut for frequency separation is, and it's the backslash key. Let's just say FS for frequency separation, hit OK. You're going to see it brings it up there. And now that I'm here, let's bring up that Express key or Express menu. And let me go ahead and merge visible because frequency separation needs to work on a layer. And if I click on this menu here, then boom, it brings up my frequency separation menu here in Affinity Photo. And then that allows me to do frequency separation. So I can, come in here and retouch the skin or do whatever I need to do. So definitely very useful to have that menu. Now you notice that when I pressed it, it disappeared. If you want to keep it up there, you can basically pin it. And then that way you can just kind of move it off to the side and it'll always be there when you do those functions. You cancel this. Let's unpin this. Let me close that. So as you can see, you can add as many functions as that pie has. Basically, the Express key and the Radial key kind of do the same thing. I think the Radial menu has a few built-in defaults, but these, of course, can all be customized. And then you can even add your own. If you come down here to this plus icon, you can add your own panel and you can have, or you can create as many buttons as I think it has here, which I think is, what is that, 12? So this will give you a little thing was 3 buttons, 6 buttons, 8, 3 buttons across, that little menu, and this big keypad. And so let's say, for example, you just wanted something with a few buttons across the top. You can click on there. You can just call it My Panel. Hit OK. And then now you have all these things here. And so if I set that button to do my panel and I bring it up, right now nothing's assigned, but you can see I have one button. But if I went over here and quickly, I'm just going to do really quick, add some buttons here. And you can see it's going to slowly start adding little buttons on your panel. And then, yeah, when I bring it up here, then I have all these little buttons. So this is definitely kind of a cool function and a cool feature, because when you're working, if you have it pinned, it's kind of nice if you have this stuff really close by, so you're not having to either, remember a keyboard shortcut or move your mouse all the way to the left or the right side of your screen. You can have these little buttons really quick and handy right there. All right, so let's go back. All right, and the last few are pretty self-explanatory. If we come down here, we have settings. If you click on this and you press that button, it kind of brings up this specialty menu where you have quick access to your pin preferences, express preferences, and you can come over here and click on the settings to bring you back to this menu basically. And then we have disabled, which basically turns the button off, and then default, returning it to its default function. Okay, so next we have, at least for the Pro, we have the touch ring. And the touch ring, very similar. You can set it to do things like scroll, zoom, rotate. You can also assign it a keystroke. And because it is a ring, you can have the keystroke do different things, whether you're doing it clockwise or counterclockwise. Again, I think this is more if you are using this tablet by itself, where you have your pen in your right hand and you're using your left hand to use these buttons. I could see it useful to doing things like increase brush size, zoom in, scroll, rotate, etc. You can also adjust the speed here. And then on-screen shortcuts, we already talked about that. Okay, so once you have all these buttons assigned to how you like, you can do a lot of really cool stuff. So next we can look at the pen, where the pen is going to have very similar functionality. The pen has two buttons here. And so the top button and the right button, or the smaller button, you can assign pretty much exactly the same. You can have it do clicks, zoom, scroll, assign it to a particular function, particular keyboard shortcut, whatever you want to do. If you're using the Pro Pen has this little eraser button, which basically defaults to the eraser. Again, you can set it to do clicks or keyboard shortcuts. Personally, I never use it just because turning the pen upside down to erase is more cumbersome than it is for me just to press E on my keyboard and erase. So that's just me. You can do your double click distance, your pressure. So you can kind of set like, the pressure sensitivity, if you want it really sensitive or not very sensitive, however you want. Again, I don't use pressure sensitivity, so I don't really have this set any particular way. Then we have mapping. And this is where you can basically map a portion of your keyboard, a portion of your tablet to a portion of your screen. So if you wanted to not use the whole area for whatever reason, you could say a portion. And then here you can say, okay, I just want the tablet to only affect that part of the screen. And if I move my mouse, I keep saying mouse. If I move my pen all the way to the right of my tablet, it only goes to the middle of my screen. This might be useful if you are maybe having one program on the left side and another program on the right side, and you just want the tablet to only use the left-hand portion of the screen. Not really sure. So I always do screen area full. Another thing you could do is you can specify which portion of the tablet you want to use. So for example, let's just say you only wanted to use the very right side of your tablet. You wanted a really small area. You could basically ignore that whole left side of your tablet. So for example, right now my cursor is all the way to the left of my screen, but on my tablet, the pen is only in the middle. It's not even utilizing the entire area of the tablet. So again, there might be use cases for this. I'm not sure. Maybe if you're using a big one and you just want to use just the top left hand of your tablet, I could see doing that. But yeah, nothing again I would really ever use. Force proportions, because this tablet I think is not 16:9, it's like 16:10, I think. So this tablet is a little bit thicker than your typical 16:9 resolution monitor. So if you wanted it to exactly match your monitor's proportions, you can force proportions. but honestly, I've never noticed any real difference when I did it that way or not. And of course, express keys, like I said, if you're right-handed, you're using the pen with your right hand, keys on the left. You can of course flip it so you could use this tablet any direction you want. If you wanted to use it where it's on top, left, right, however, lots of things you can do like that. And I believe that is going to be it. So I think maybe I didn't say, but yeah, you can add as many programs as you want. You can see here on my pen, I also have functions for Capture One. I have functions on using Safari. I can use the pen to scroll up and down. And in Affinity Photo, it has its own functions. But under the function buttons, I just have Affinity Photo assigned here right now. So I think that's pretty much it as far as all the cool things you can do with your Wacom tablet. If you guys know of any other cool tricks and stuff, please let me know. But I do think using things like those on-screen controls can be very useful. They're there. I honestly don't really use them. Like I said, I've got so many keyboard shortcuts remapped on my keyboard. I've kind of memorized where everything is, so I don't necessarily need more on-screen controls. But if you want to use a tablet without a keyboard and you just want to use the tablet two-handed, it might be useful to have a little express tablet or express radio wheel so you actually have more functions and you don't actually need a keyboard. But for me, I use the keyboard and the tablet together, so that's just my style. Alrighty guys, I hope this video was helpful. Maybe you learned a few things you didn't know were there. If you do have some more tricks that I'm unaware of, please let me know. And until then guys, thanks for watching and I will see you in the next video. Alright, peace.